Taiwan's military has a fertility problem as China fears grow its recruitment pool shrinks. A military cadet graduated in Taipei, Taiwan in 2018. Taipei, Taiwan CNN. Taiwan has noticed a hole in its defense plans that is steadily getting bigger, and it now won't easily plugged by boosting and the budget or buying more weapons. The isolated democracy of 23.5 million is facing an increasing challenge in recruiting enough young men to meet its military target, and its Interior Ministry has suggested the problem is, at least in part, due to its stubbornly low birth rate. Taiwan's population fell for the first time in 2020, according to the ministry, which warned earlier this year that the 2022 military intake would be the lowest in the decade and that the continued drop in the youth population would pose a huge challenge for the future. That's bad news at a time when Taiwan is trying to bolster its forces to deter any potential invasion by China, whose ruling Communist Party has been making increasingly belligerent noises about its determination to reunify with the self-governed islands, which it has never controlled by force if necessary. And the outlook has darkened further with the release of the new report by Taiwan's National Development Council projecting that by 2035, the island can expect roughly 20,000 fewer births per year than the 153,820 it recorded in 2021. By 2035, Taiwan will also overtake South Korea as the jurisdiction with the world's lowest birth rate, the report added. Such projections were feeding into a debate over whether the government should increase the period of mandatory military service that eligible young men must serve. Currently, the Iceland has the professional military force made up of 162,000 as of June this year, 7,000 fewer than the target, according to the report by the Registrative Yuan. In addition to that number, all eligible men must serve 4 months of training as reservist. Changing the mandatory service requirement to be a major U-turn for Taiwan, which had previously been trying to cut down on conscription and shortened the mandatory service from 12 months as recently as 2018. But on Wednesday, Taiwan's Minister of National Defense Chiu Kuo-chang said such plans will be made public before the end of the year. That news has met with opposition among some young students in Taiwan who have voiced their frustrations on PTT, Taiwan's version of Reddit, even, even if there is a support for the move among the wider public. A poll by the Taiwanese Public Opinion Foundation in March this year found that most Taiwanese agreed with the proposal to lengthen the service period. It found that 75.9% of respondents thought it res- respondents thought it reasonable to extend it to a year. Only 17.8% were opposed. Many experts argue there is simply no other option. Chu Yun, a director of Taiwan's Institute for National Defense and Security Research, said that before 2016, the pool of men eligible to join the military, either as career soldiers or as reservists, was about 110,000. Since then, he said the number had declined every year and the pool would likely be as low as 74,000 by 2025, and within the next decade, Su said the number of young adults available for recruitment by the Taiwanese military could drop by as much as a third. This is a national security issue for us, as he said. The population pool is decreasing, so we are actively considering whether to resume conscription to meet our military needs. We are now facing an increasing threat from China, and we need to have more firepower and manpower. A unique problem: Taiwan's low birth rate, 0.98, is far below the 2.1 needed to maintain a stable population, but it is no outlier in East Asia. In November, South Korea broke its own world record when its birth rate dropped to 0.79, while Japan's fell to 1.3 and mainland China hit 1.15. Even so, experts say the trend poses a unique problem for Taiwan's military, given the relative size of the island and the threat it faces. China has been making increasingly aggressive noises towards the island since August, when then U.S. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi controversially visited Taipei. Not long after she landed in Taiwan, Beijing also launches the series of unprecedented military exercises around the island. Since then, the temperature has remained high, particularly as Chinese leader Xi Jinping told the key Communist Party meeting in October that reunification was inevitable and that he reserves the option of taking all measures necessary. Chang Yan-ting, a former deputy commander of Taiwan's Air Force, said that while low birth rates were common across East Asia, the situation in Taiwan is very different, as the Iceland was facing more and more pressure from China, and the situation will become more acute. The United States has military bases in Japan and South Korea, while Singapore does not face an acute military threat from its neighbors. Taiwan faces the greatest threat, and the declining birth rate will make the situation even more serious, he added. Loy Lee, a deputy executive director at Taiwan's Changhua Institution for Economic Research, agreed that the security threat facing Taiwan were greater than those in the rest of the region. The situation is more challenging for Taiwan because our population base is smaller than other countries facing similar problems, he added. Taiwan's population is 23.5 million compared to South Korea's 52 million, Japan's 126 million, and China's 1.4 billion. Not just a recruitment problem. Besides the shrinking recruitment pool, the decline in the youth population could also threaten a long-term performance of Taiwan's economy, which is itself a pillar of the island's defense. Taiwan is world's 21 largest economy according to the London-based Centre for Economics and Business Research, and had a GDP of $668.51 billion last year. Much of its economic heft comes from its leading role in the supply of semiconductor chips, which play an indispensable role in everything from smartphones to computers. Taiwan's homegrown semiconductor giant TSMC is perceived as being so valuable to the global economy as well as to China that it is sometimes referred to as forming part of the Silicon Shield against the potential military invasion by Beijing, as its presence would give a strong incentive to the West to intervene. Lee noted that population levels are closely intertwined with gross domestic product, a broad measure of economic activity. A population decline of 200,000 people could result in a 0.4% decline in GDP. All else being equal, he said. It's very difficult to increase GDP by 0.4% and would require a lot of effort. So the fact that a declining population can take away that much growth is big, he said. Fighting back, Taiwan's government has brought in the series of measures aimed at encouraging people to have babies, but with limited success. It pays parents a monthly stipend of 5,000 Taiwan dollars, 161 US dollars for their first baby, and a higher amount of each additional one. Since last year, pregnant, pregnant women have been eligible for 7 days of leave for obstetri- obstet- obstetrics check prior to giving birth. Outside the military, in the wider economy, the Iceland has been increasing migrant workers to fill job vacancies. Statistics from the National Development Council shows that about 670,000 migrant workers were in Taiwan at the end of the last year, compro- comprom- comprising about 3% of the population. Most of the migrant workers are employed in the manufacturing sector, the council said, the vast majority of them from Vietnam, Indonesia, Thailand, and the Philippines. Lee said in the long term, the Taiwanese government would likely have to reform its immigration policies to bring in more migrant workers. Still, there are those who say Taiwan's low birth rate is no reason to panic just yet. Eric Cheung, an associate professor in sociology at Taiwan's Academia Sinica, cautioned against reading too much into population trends as they were affected by so many factors. She pointed out that just a few decades ago, many demographers were warning of food shortages caused by the population explosion, and even if the low birth rate endured, that might be no bad thing if it were a reflection of the improvement in women's rights, she said. The educational expansion that took place in the 70s and 80s in East Asia dramatically changed the women's status. It really pushed the women out of their homes because they had knowledge, education, and career prospects, she said. The next thing you see globally is that once a woman's education level improved, the fertility rate started declining. All these East Asian countries are really stretching their heads and is trying to think about policies and interventions to boost fertility rate, she added. But if that's something that really women don't want, can't you push them to do that?